This is the water, and this is the well. Drink full and descend. The horse is the white of the eyes, and dark within. This is the water, and this is the well. Drink full and descend. The horse is the white of the eyes, and dark within.
Seemed appropriate, this clip from Twin Peaks, The Return, Episode 8, which I feel is the most mind-blowing, trippy, and visually nuclear television content ever. Most Gnostic, too. And David Lynch and Mark Frost completely rolled out their cosmology and architecture for demon and spirit possession.
Is it some devil that crawls inside of you?
It's appropriate because we'll be talking about demon and spirit possession in this eternal now. And it's probably more ubiquitous than you could have ever imagined. It's a busy universe out there, and a large part of its denizens are gunning for your doom.
You know, just like to fall in the mud and get kicked in the head by an iron boot. Of course you don't. No one does. It never happens. Sorry, Ted, it's a dumb question. Skip that.
But what did you expect now that you took a stroll out of Plato's cave and glimpsed the sun of truth? After all, Emile Cioran wrote, "Injustice governs the universe. All that is made and all that is unmade, the rain carries the imprint of a corrupt fragility, as if matter were the fruit of an outrage in the womb of nothingness." And poet Jack Spicer wrote, "Mechanically we move in God's universe, unable to do without the grace or hatred of Him."
Got it all wrong, holy man. I absolutely believe in God. And I absolutely hate the fucker.
He is with us nonetheless.
She knows that even if God is dead, you're still gonna kiss his ass.
We live in a prison full of crappy kismet. The good news is that you are here and you are amazing. And you're remembering this as you continue to materialize at the virtual Alexandria to listen to Aeon Bite Gnostic Radio. You are the final authority, have always been. You are a veteran of 1,000 psychic wars, a modern-day Tom Sawyer, your mind not for rent by any god or government. You just needed some gnosis to break those mind-forged manacles that William Blake wrote about and bend the bars of the Black Iron Prison that Philip K. Dick wrote about. I, your host, Miguel Connor, is with you all the way on this dark odyssey through the gnashing rocks of orthodoxy, all the way to the farthest shores of imagination.
It might be true that there are 6 billion people in the world and counting. Nevertheless, what you do makes a difference. And in short, I think the message here is that we should never simply write ourselves off and see ourselves as the victim of various forces. It's always our decision who we are.
But you may be asking about all this palaver on demon and spirit possession. Let's deal with this. Our astral guest is Susan B. Martinez, who will be discussing her new book, Field Guide to the Spiritual World, The Science of Angel Power, Discarnate Entities, and Demonic Possession.
You're not afraid of the dark, are you?
Susan is a writer, linguist, teacher, paranormal researcher, and recognized authority on the Oahspe Bible, with a doctorate in anthropology from Columbia University. I really enjoyed Susan's book, and it really granted me many new dimensions, not only on the antagonistic spirit and demon world, but the rank failure scientism and vanilla spirituality of the last 100 years.
He who questions training only trains himself at asking questions.
What?
During the interview, I felt Susan didn't accept my ideas that addiction is also a form of possession, in the Jungian sense of the dark archetype. And it's a pity. As Jonathan Stewart likes to say, I don't know if the archons exist, but they sure act like it. And it was David Schoen in our recent interview who said that addiction parallels demon possession to the T. In my experience, he's right. But agreeing completely is something for the Heilig and normies outside of the virtual Alexandria. Not for those of us who run with those searching for the truth and avoid those who have found it.
There is no price for individuality.
I mean, perhaps everyone is spirit and demon possessed. At least that's what some ancient Gnostics claimed. As both the Pistis Sophia and the Secret Book of John explain, the counterfeit spirit is inserted into our souls before we are born. A kind of virus code or bizarro okema that holds all of our shortfalls, karma, heart-numbing events, and just shitty choices. As long as we despair in ignorance, the mother of all sins, as the Gospel of Philip states, we can't escape the black iron prison, and we can't help others out of Plato's cave. So in a rare act of intelligence, Yaldi loaded the dice even before the game began, possessing us with the counterfeit spirit.
I was so close to opening the park that to acknowledge your consciousness would have destroyed my dreams.
So we're trapped here, inside your dream. You'll never let us sleep.
But there's always cracks in the machine, and that's how the light gets in, as Leonard Cohen wrote. And we're receiving that Valis pink light, and we're changing the very code of the cosmos with our revolutionary art, invention, and curiosity. That's why we must write our own gospel and live our own myth. Many people ask me, what does it mean to write your own gospel and live your own myth? Don't want to get too detailed, because the devil is in the details, and details makes us all devils. So I'll be brief. Church Father Irenaeus complained that the Gnostics were pumping out gospels every bloody day, like romance novels or something. What these Gnostics were doing wasn't just only expressing their shamanistic voyages, but bringing out their own internal processes by offering their version of Jesus and other luminaries. It was as psychological as it was mystical. It was about self-discovery as much as it was about cosmic revelation.
Your own father said that artists use lies to tell the truth.
We do it today, sorta. Perhaps in fan fiction or diaries, which are ultimately platforms of individuation, as they are the unraveling of deeper, universal truths. And writing your own gospel is a way to calibrate your ethics and morality to that of a chaotic world. Find those endings that the Logos and Sophia should have had, or are having in your heart.
You need to believe in things that aren't true. How else can they become?
As for myth, the universe is made of narratives. From Theranos to Trump, from Russiagate to Benghazi. It's the stories that shape reality and very little else. Thus, narratives are more powerful than facts or truths, as they hold human existence together. That's why brilliant people will believe abundantly stupid ideas, and populations will embrace their own self-destruction.
What the hell happened to us? What happened to the American dream?
It came true. You're looking at it.
The way not to be trapped in the narratives of others is to be connected to the myths that are the avenue into the world of archetypes and symbols. What's more, each of our lives is connected to some ancient myth and its archetypes. As above, so below, said Hermes Trismegistos, speaking through Apollonius of Tyana. Maybe it's Odysseus, or maybe it's Medea. Maybe it's Isis, or maybe it's Gilgamesh. That's for you to find, even if there's nothing new under the sun. But if you can find those myths that are cosmic and correspond to you, you can understand them, deconstruct them, and break the bonds of fate. Remove the code of the counterfeit spirit. And maybe it's a modern myth you need to wrap yourself in, express it, make it your own, and transcend it to become pure and astral. Doesn't mean you have to dress up like King Arthur or Cloudstrife, but simply flow with the narrative until you gain understanding and direction.
Myths are clues?
Myths are clues to the spiritual potentialities of the human life.
What we're capable of knowing within?
Yes.
And experiencing within.
Yes.
I liked you changed the definition of a myth from the search for meaning to the experience of meaning.
Experience.
The experience of life.
The experience of life.
Like C.G. Jung wrote, meaning makes a great many things endurable, perhaps everything. No science will ever replace myth, and myth cannot be made out of any science. For it is not that, quote, God is a myth, but that myth is a revelation of a divine life in man. I hope this makes sense, but I hope it doesn't make too much sense. I do know that Jung warned not to identify too much with an archetype, as it will destroy you. But you can identify with a myth or two. You can make your own narrative, story. And remember, myth was meant to make you transparent to the transcendent, but also be beneficial to the tribe, to all of humanity, and to all other creatures. So being some asshat guru or pharaoh incarnation, some cult of personality, is not living your own myth, but that of the archons. Just saying. At least you won't be possessed by demons or spirits, but you'll be brimming with your own ignited divine spark. Led us to the interview with Susan Martinez. As a bonus, for members and patrons, Scott Smith, my friend and author of God Reconsidered, will join us afterwards, since he's also an expert on the topics we covered in the interview. Miss it not.
Yes.
Sir, what if a writer is attempting to create a story where nothing much happens, where people don't change, they don't have any epiphanies, they struggle and are frustrated and nothing is resolved? More a reflection of the real world.
The real world?
Yes, sir.
The real fucking world. First of all, you write a screenplay without conflict or crisis, you'll bore your audience to tears. Secondly, nothing happens in the world? Are you out of your fucking mind? People are murdered every day. There's genocide, war, corruption. Every fucking day, somewhere in the world, somebody sacrifices his life to save somebody else. Every fucking day, someone somewhere takes a conscious decision to destroy someone else. People find love. People lose it. For Christ's sake, a child watches a mother beaten to death on the steps of a church. Someone goes hungry. Somebody else betrays his best friend for a woman. If you can't find that stuff in life, then you, my friend, don't know crap about life. And why the fuck are you wasting my 2 precious hours with your movie? I don't have any use for it. I don't have any bloody use for it.
Okay, thanks.
This is the Aeon Byte interview, and with us we definitely have the pleasure of having on Susan B. Martinez to discuss her book, Field Guide to the Spirit World, The Science of Angel Power, Discarnate Entities, and Demonic Possession. ¿Cómo estás, Susana?
Yo estoy bien, ¿y tú?
Muy bien, muy bien. Gracias por estar en el show. But again, we better do it in English, or we do have a sizable Hispanic audience that loves the show. So, but we better do it in English because that's still the lingua franca of podcasting here in the United States. So,
Entonces mejor en inglés.
Sí, esta vez en inglés y vamos a ver la próxima vez, ¿no? Muy bien.
¿Quién sabe?
¿Quién sabe? Sí, vamos a ver qué está en el futuro. So, and with us we have Vance Sachi. How you doing, Vance?
Holy guacamole, I'm just fine.
Yes, we'll be speaking in tongues. So, Susan, your book was an amazing read, and as we'll discuss, it actually informed a lot of my views and really brought a lot to the table. And I think the audience would definitely benefit from such a book, especially if you're interested in the paranormal, or as you call it, parascience. So, but before we get started on your great book, Field Guide to the Spirit World, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became interested in parascience.
It kind of creeped up on me. I guess it started in the 80s. Miguel, no me gusta hablar de yo misma.
Okay. We can skip that and get on to the main event. So, Susan, it's safe to say that science has done a poor job understanding the spirit world. And you, of course, write about this and argue about this and bring a lot of evidence about this in your book. So tell the audience, how has science done damage, especially when it comes to the field of psychology and psychiatry, to human nature?
This is one of the main themes of the book. It's generally known as scientific materialism. It has been shortened to SciMat, so we can talk about it real quick. We are at the height of it now. We're at the height of scientific materialism, and it has led us astray in almost every possible field you could mention. But being a spiritualist, okay, see, I can talk about myself, but just in the context of the ideas we're exchanging, I'm a spiritualist. I became a spiritualist in the 1980s after receiving the Oahspe Bible. I am not, excuse me, I'm not a clairvoyant. In other words, I have not written this book about my own private experiences with the spirit world. And some people tend to think that's who I am and that's what I'm going to talk about. It's not so. This is a scholarly work, really, and I take an intellectual approach to it, not a personal experience approach. Being a spiritualist, most of my associates in Oahspe and in spiritualism are the mediumistic. Okay, I'm not. I'm just recording information that I've gathered and putting the story together. Okay, Miguel, remind me what I'm talking about. I forgot what the question was.
The failure of science, how it has done harm in the evolution. Yeah, SciMat, there you go.
Simon. We're going. We're getting more lost by the day. We need to come back and balance science with spirit.
Yes, indeed. And your book says, yes, when science and spirituality work together, it's a beautiful thing. I think I'm actually quoting you there. And yes, for the audience, the book is chock full of case studies, research, scholarship. It's endless, really. It's just, I would doubt any skeptic, or as I call them, professional debunkers, would have a good chance with this book because, again, and your arguments are very sound. I thought that they were very convincing. But what do you think happened? You talk about, I remember going to a spiritualist church about 10 years ago, and I had spiritualist friends that I talked to, and it was just awesome, talking how they talk to the dead and all that. And I did some ghost hunting too, professionally. So I have had experience with these matters. But again, the spiritualist church started, 19th century, and then I think theosophy sort of changed it. What happened with this, in a lot of ways, the rich occult movement of the 19th century that just got all these wonderful spiritual things got pushed away?
You mean after the all the spiritual excitement in the mid-century?
Exactly.
Oh. It had a few decades where it rode really high. This was actually to explain this means getting into some other kind of material. There is a cyclic pattern on the earth for spiritualism and versus materialism and darkness. Materialism in many respects is equivalent of darkness. In the year 1848, which is when the Hydesville event opened things up, that was the first year of the new era. It's a 3,000-year cycle. With it comes new light. It has to do with the movement of the solar system through the cosmos. This is of the kind of material which is also conveyed in the Oahspe Bible and makes you aware of how much we need cosmic science in order to understand what's going on Earth. There are regions of darkness and regions of light that the planet, it's part of the solar system, travels through in its regular journey through the universe. And so even weather patterns will depend on what part of the cosmos we're in. In any case, I could maybe summarize it by saying we're in a new era. It's called Cosmon. It signals the true awakening of humanity to its cosmic potential. And it is a 3,000-year cycle that brings us to this point. And okay, we can actually get back to Simat at this point, because this, at the end of every cycle, the darkness that we have developed pulls us down, and there's a collapse of the civilization at hand, and after that, a new one arises, and that's the point we're at now.
So, according to this, things are going to get better, right? Are we looking? Are you talking about better is what, a spiritual world, or you think a world of balance where humans are in a state of balance between matter and the spiritual world?
Absolutely, that's the best way you could have said it.
Well, there you go. And you mentioned the Oahspe Bible or book. I wasn't familiar with it, but I did some research. It is fascinating, and I like to pride myself of knowing all about the different apocrypha and occult books, but I completely missed it, and I think a lot of our audience have missed it, and they'd be interested in. So could you tell the audience about it?
Sure. You got a lot of company, Miguel. Very few people are familiar with Oahspe. It came into the world as a new Bible for mankind in the 1880s. You're probably curious, so I'll mention that it came through as a channeled work. It was the first and biggest example of automatic typewriting. The Remington typewriter had come out in 1876, and no sooner did the angels prepare for the transmission of Oahspe, which began in 1880 and was completed and published in 1882. It took a year of typing. The amanuensis was a dentist in New York by the name of John Ballou Newbrough. In the year 1870, he was awakened in the middle of the night by a phalanx of angels who confronted him. He was mediumistic, so he was not totally surprised by the manifestation in his bedchamber. They asked him if he would please or be willing to perform a mission for the Creator. He asked what it would be like. He was told a few things, but in particular told that he needed to purify himself. He became vegetarian. He was told to generate goodwill. He gave free dentistry, etc., to prepare himself as a perfect channel. And so it happened. It was brought forward in 1882, and there was an immediate cult that formed around it, and in fact they gathered together and formed where community was one of the principal doctrines in Oahspe, and so that they rallied around that and went out west, formed a community in the desert of New Mexico, and et cetera, et cetera. There's some information out on that. It was called Shalom, the community, and of course that is the word for peace and harmony.
Muy bien, me gusta mucho, and I always say, nobody knows about the Gnostic Gospels, and it's nice to see something just as niche and out there as the Gnostic Gospels. And you say it's not Christian, right? It's more eclectic. It talks about farther back ages and brings up perhaps other gods.
Right. It's not a Christian. It doesn't favor any religion. It's set forth as a universal religion. In fact, predicts that this will be the single religion for mankind in the coming time. And if I had to break down its contents, I would say that there are three main areas of revelation. One is the records of the race, which actually got me going. I couldn't really cover those topics until I had written 3 books on ancient mysteries, and that sort of covered it. So that's where a lot of stuff is cleared up about what went on this planet in the last 80,000 years. The second main area of revelation is science. It presents a new science. In fact, I've been working on one aspect of it this week, trying to explain the crazy weather, because we don't have tools to do that without consulting Oahspe. and the book of cosmogony and prophecy. And the third area is the spirit world. And so, for example, interesting how the book is laid out. The book contains 33 books. It's 33 books in one. It's about, it's close to 1 million words. It's about 900 pages. Okay, what I was going to say that is interesting is that several of the books, when you look at the page, there's a horizontal line right in the middle of the page, and that gives you the upper book and the lower book. And so let's say we're reading about the lives of the prophets, and it does cover all the major prophets and their lives. That occurs in the lower book. The upper book gives the heavenly events that were occurring at the same time. So that is something that's kind of unique. I really don't think it's ever been done. There are quite a few other features about Oahspe that are unique, but yes, it's a Bible for everyone and anyone who is interested in being enlightened.
Wonderful. And for the audience, it's Oahspe. I certainly want to do some more research on it. I like how it has the two levels. I'm thinking as above, so below, as Hermes Trismegisto said. So, and before we get into the real crux of your book, but this is also in your book, you talk about, again, the failure of scientism today and how it's done an injustice to human evolution and, the betterment for all people. And you make great arguments, but you also write that New Agers, in their narcissism, also don't help because they're always basically in their head and everything is about them. Isn't that true?
Oh, yes. And, I mean, I have maybe more trouble with New Age than I have with the conservative view. In fact, sometimes I line up. Sometimes I line up with glass bowls like Donald Trump. Things are in such a state of confusion and chaos right now that you can't count on any partisanship to bring the answers. You got to think for yourself. You got to think out each issue for its own value. The liberal. I get more annoyed each day by liberal and politically correct stuff and New Age stuff than almost anything else. Because, for example, the New Age was very kind and open to the doctrine of reincarnation, and that is the most negative force on the earth against people learning what spiritualism is. And so that's an example right there. Reincarnation is the total hype and total hoax, and takes us exactly away from what spiritualism needs to teach about the next life without a body. And so reincarnation, which has been brought forth by the New Age and coddled by the New Age, is just in the way of learning and enlightenment.
Indeed, we've had guests,
and they even took over. Spiritualism. The word spiritism at some point became the word for the theory of reincarnation. So they robbed our thunder, and you can tell how annoyed I am. So, yeah, I have a lot of problems with the New Age, with concepts like unconditional love, with concepts like there's a lot about the press for egalitarian values that I can't agree with, and that I think distorts things terribly. So, yeah.
Oh, we agree with you. And in fact, we recently had Mitch Horowitz, who's a card-carrying New Ager, but he talks about all the issues with New Age. Reincarnation is not even on the table or any of that fluffy stuff. But you have a chapter, a dedicated chapter, well-argued chapter called The Reincarnation Hoax. And could you tell the audience what are some of the other issues with reincarnation? After all, some people might say, well, the Buddhists and the Hindus have believed it for thousands of years. So what's going on?
You mentioned the word narcissism a few sentences back as a part of my problem with the New Age. And yes, I believe the entire culture that we're in right now has gone very much in the direction of narcissism, and this has been apparent since the 1970s. You know, who was it wrote that fabulous book on narcissism in the 70s? Do you recall? Or, well, it just doesn't avail me at the moment, but. The culture of narcissism. So, to a certain degree, the theory of reincarnation feeds that narcissism, you know, because this self of ours is given the promise that it can come back and be another self again. You know, the danger there, Miguel, is spirit possession. The danger there is that this spirit, this person who goes to the spirit world believing in reincarnation, will try to come back and will inhabit a mortal body, and if he is successful, will demonize or possess that body. And that's exactly what spirit possession is. We don't need spirits like that. We don't need people going to the spirit world with that belief, because it's very dangerous.
Indeed, and also don't you think that, and you write about this, the theory of reincarnation tends to be, as speaking of New Agers, it's a form of victim shaming. Like, people deserve what they get. They deserve the pain they're in. Like the Jews at Auschwitz were just working something out, right?
Right. Those kind of arguments are so repulsive that people who were taken in slavery here in America in the 16th century were working out their karma, and it makes everything acceptable because of past sins, and that's not at all how things work.
No, and you even talk about, there's the research of Ian Stevenson from the University of Virginia that's very famous and has pushed forward the idea of reincarnation, but you find a lot of weak arguments in that, right?
Oh, yeah. First of all, for one thing, he went to, Stevenson conducted his third world research in places that already believed in reincarnation, and so that's where he got the evidence from people who believed in it, and it's actually a false belief.
So if somebody were to say, what is your view of the afterlife, Susan, what is your answer to that? Because I know you don't think we just go immediately. I know, I've read your book, we just don't go immediately to a cloud with wings and a harp, right?
Right. The first thing is to accept the idea that there are places prepared for us once we drop the body, and that's the big hurdle. You have a lot of people in our society who, no matter what their religious views are, do not believe that there's anything after this life on earth. And that's one of the reasons I wrote the book, to give a picture of the spirit world and what a person can expect.
And you did a great job. Muy buen trabajo, como dicen. Pero I guess, why don't we get to the central thesis? And again, you bring so much research and case studies that it's hard to argue against. So you make an excellent argument that a lot of the issues today that whether it's mental disease, drug addiction, and even violent criminality is because of spirit possession. And I guess we can start out with, what exactly are the spirits that are invading us? Are these the recently dead, some sort of demons, or other forms of interdimensional consciousness? Who are these spirits? Or are there more than one answer?
The cases that I worked most consistently with in the book were cases of multiple personality disorder, MPD. And that's where you get an individual who, a person living here on Earth, who has been taken over by any number of entities in the non-corporeal world. Some of them are aware of their alters. These other personalities are called alters. Some of them are not aware until they're diagnosed, but even the diagnosis is not much help. And this is where we really come into the contrast between psychiatry and spiritualism. It's a plain fact to the spiritualist that a person assailed by alters is open to spirit. They've had their psyche opened up in most cases by trauma, early life trauma. And that is what is happening. Psychiatry is part of the PsyMat universe that we're living in right now, and so they cannot recognize anything beyond the material plane. And so the person suffering from multiple personality disorder they have to be diagnosed in such a way that the alters are considered different strains of persona coming from their own unconscious mind, inner selves. That this is so false, and this is so far from understanding and coping with these problems that it has to be exposed. Now, I'm not the first one who brought this out in a book or article. It's been known for forever. But we've gotten to a point of no return with PsyMat. And so the thing has to be blown up, and people have to see that it's not a horror show we're talking about. It's not horror. It's just a fact of life that spirit is spirit forever. It's an eternal. Each consciousness is an eternal thing. Life is eternal. Life is ongoing. We just go into a different plane of existence once we're out of the body. And those who are in better shape go into the light regions and do the advanced work that is expected of all spirits. But those who have too many issues and too much ignorance about what is ahead linger on the earth plane and become earthbound entities, troublesome entities. Right now, there's so much darkness on earth from these entities. We are not going to be able to solve our problems until we own up that we are spiritual beings.
I agree with you 100%. I mean, you even write that the United States is the You might say the serial killer capital of the world. And I think rape is second or third. So what we're seeing here is the United States basically has a vacuum for spirituality.
Yeah, and yet, as the prophecies go, America, whose spiritual name is Gautama, I'll be writing about that in my next book. I have a chapter on Gautama, is destined to be the beacon of light for the rest of the world. We are going to experience all the convolution of change, the collapse that's coming very soon, but we will not be as damaged as other parts of the world, and we will remain we're already the Mecca of the world. With all our faults, we're still the Mecca of the world.
Yes, we are. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, Bob Baer has a cute anecdote that I like. He's one of our best experts on the Mideast political situation and terrorism. He was operative for 20 years.
Wow.
In the Middle East. Robert Baer, his books are really worth reading. He's got a novel also. Baer is B-A-E-R. Anyway, he describes being present at a rally in some Middle Eastern city. I think it was in Iran, but I'm not sure. And it was a hate it, death to America, a death to America rally, and all of that. And he got talking with an old guy who was calling out death to America. How do they say it? I can almost remember the Arabic words, but not quite. And anyway, after they got through a little bit into their conversation, the old guy asked him how he could get a visa to America. And Fareed, I think it's Fareed Zakaria, who said when middle class Arabs go on vacation, they don't go to the mosques of Iran. They go to this razzle dazzle of Dubai.
Of course, that Western luxury.
Let's face facts. The modern world is here to stay. America is here to stay. There's a reason we're the Mecca of light for the world. We've got lots of faults to us, plenty faults, but we're going to redeem ourselves and make it okay, and to lead the way. And the Native American is the reason this is going to be happening.
Really,
the Native
that's
American will lead us.
I hope so, because I'd rather have make the spiritual world great again. That's a hat I'll wear.
That's it. The Native American never lost track of their creator, never, and still not. And so we're going to need their guidance, not only for spiritual reasons, but for living on the earth as well.
Let's talk a little bit about the spirits here that are down, because I think this is important information for people, especially those who might be struggling, well, like me, with the mental diseases, alcoholism, others with far worse situations, because this really adds a dimension that is necessary. It's a form of help, something that, well, I'll talk about myself, how it's helped me, but let's talk about the conditions that allow these spirits that don't want to leave the world. You talked about trauma, but then you bring up some other interesting ones that are important, and that is being around the dead, which was, I thought was a little bit strange. I mean, I grew up in Mexico, and we were always around the dead. It's just the culture, right? But you talk, for example, that somebody like John Wayne Gacy, he drove an ambulance and he slept in a mortuary. So basically, being around the dead without protection or the right things is one way you can be invaded.
Yeah, there's a whole science there, Miguel. I don't think I can say it all tonight, but yes, there are so many factors that can open up psyche. Trauma is one of them. Severe illness, particularly in very early life, is another. When we're young, when we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, we're much closer to spirit world. We don't get separated from it until society teaches us to, straighten up and fly right. Yeah. So lots of things can happen in early life, and yes, there are grave diggers that the biggest serial killer they had in England. What was his name? I'm not remembering it. Peter Sutcliffe. He was a grave digger for a while. When you look at their stories, when you go into their past, you will find the experience that opened up their psyche, or that was dangerous for them to be exposed to. And so the book has like dozens of instances that put us in harm's way. But now you got me interested when you were talking about alcoholic. Fill me in on that.
Sure, I'd love to, because I'd love to get your thoughts. Recently, we had David Schoen, who's a Jungian therapist, and he wrote a book years ago that I love, The War of the Gods in Addiction. And he talks about the correspondence between Bill W. and Carl Jung towards the end of their lives, when they both had retired, nothing to lose, right? They could speak honestly. And they were talking about alcoholism, how Carl Jung's ideas helped AA. And Carl Jung basically said, look, this is something I call archetypal evil, and you may call it in the West the devil, if that's the word you want to use. But basically, Jung was saying that to treat alcoholism right, you have to think of it as an independent form of evil that possesses you. And that's what David Schoen's book, he makes the argument of how people who are drug addicts or alcoholics have the same, behavior or phenomena as somebody who is demon possessed. And the way to treat it well, which science has failed at, is through a spiritual life. And of course, somebody who I went into AA years ago, and an alcoholic, I always felt I had no free will while I was doing drugs and stealing and dealing and ignoring my family. I mean, I would do these horrible things and I felt trapped in my head. So when I decided to give my body a rest and begin living a spiritual life, as they say, giving up to a higher power, that's when I was able to deal with my alcoholism. But at the end of the day, I think Jung and David Schoen and Bill W. were right. It was this archetypal evil that had taken over my life. So I'm sure you would agree with this, right?
To a point. I want to say that we have free will. I've been thinking a little bit about this lately, and I think I'll tell you, it actually came out of another one of my beefs with New Age. I was entertaining this idea that we're not born with any rights. Okay, because I see animal rights and this rights and everything rights, and I just up to my eyeballs in everything having rights, until I said to myself, we're not born with any rights. Okay, and the thinking that followed that was that the only thing we're born with, that the Creator gives us, is free will. We don't got no rights. It's all how how we treat each other, for God's sake. Yeah. I'm still working on that, but okay, now, for some reason I wanted to say what we've got is free will. This is our precious gift from the Creator, you know. So if I'm a drug addict, or if I got loose morals, or if I do nasty things, it's me, and it's my own choices, and it's my own control or lack of control. And I'm not going to pin this on no spirits. No, it's me. But I become attractive to similar spirits the more it becomes habitual with me. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
Good. So this is my point of view. The bad habits, this is all on me. It's all on me. Can't go blaming it on nobody and no spirits. But it sets me up for additional problems, because the principle is like unto like. You see, when we cross over to the spirit world, we don't change at all. Nothing changes. We still are the same person. There's no enlightenment crossing over. You better believe it. If we take our knowledge, we take our goodness with us exactly in the state that it's in when we make the transition. So, like unto like, we will attract the lower our behavior is, to equal measure we attract that kind of spiritual companion, whether we're aware of it or not.
Yeah, but Susana, déjame preguntarte let me ask you this, though. In your book, you catalog all these serial killers down just like you catalog all the evil spirits throughout history. Of course, 98% of cultures believe in negative spirits. Like you said, it's only this Western thing that has changed. But you talk about all these serial killers and the different things, the parallels that really ties them to spirit possession or something really dark that science makes no sense in science. And a lot of these is, of course, they have childhood traumas. They were abused. A lot of them were poor kids. Even you talk about Ted Bundy. We have this sort of trope in the West that Ted Bundy was the exception, that he had a good life and all. But you catalog very well. He had some bad things happen to him as a child. So when these children are traumatized, they become vessels for the spirit. So I don't think they were asking for such pain that takes over their lives.
What is your point exactly?
Well, that sometimes, when you're a child...
Oh, you mean that he's truly a victim?
Well, yeah, you could say they are a victim. They're a victim of yeah.
If that's what you're saying, you're absolutely right. We are too young. In some cases, we're too young to defend ourselves, and the adult presence is so negative. Absolutely. These people were victims and grew up and became and started to victimize chosen objects, in the killing and in the harming. That's just how it works.
But, as you write, they were driven by dark forces, right? You write whether it's John Wayne Gacy or the Night Stalker, was the name Hernandez. They had periods where they would just black out for long times. They had no idea a lot of the time what they were doing because they were completely taken over, right?
Yes, that is really true. And so I'm trying to... Okay, I think I know where we're at now. I was talking about free will, and I'm trying to say at this point that persons who have been victimized so young in life have had their free will took from them. They cannot operate on any adult basis or making any choices for themselves. They have been took by the darkness too young to defend themselves or to correct themselves, and these are indeed cases, hopeless cases. And it's not only the family, it's also the society.
So, Vince, do you have a question for Susan?
Yeah. Susan, what do you think of, the practice that people, engage in, such as Ouija boards, or, as you mentioned before, with respect to the Oahspe Bible, automatic writing? Is it dangerous? Is it beneficial? What do you think?
The first thing I would want to know is why. Why is a person doing this? What's motivating them? I will tell you that some of the people I've known or have known about who operate, connecting with the next world, healers and exorcists and stuff like that. The ones I like the most and respect the most have a procedure. Most of them are quite, creative, original. They have their own, exact procedure for doing it. But the point I'm trying to make is that the ones who I think are doing it right are asking for permission before they start. Like I'm a pendulumist myself. I use a pendulum, and it's really great. You can get yes/no answers about anything. If you just need an answer. I only use it intermittently. I don't use it for any regular kind of work, but pendulumism is wonderful for hooking up direct with your spirit companions and just getting an answer one way or the other. Usually it's to help someone, but before you start with the pendulum, you ask the spirits for permission and you get a reading on that, and then you go from there. Yeah, so I'm mostly interested in what your motivation is. I was just reading some religious books, and it was Oriental religion, and there was some dharma that they were giving that on earnestness. It was such a nice passage. I couldn't quote it to you, but it was just giving the dharma of earnestness, and that really counts.
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
I did ghost hunting years ago, and I remember when we were training and we used divination rods and the spirit box, and we go down to places where Al Capone had killed people, and we bring people down. It was called Chicago Ghost Investigations. And in our training, basically the one thing that the guy who trained us, who was a cop, started this company because he'd had a spiritual experience. He'd survived a lightning bolt, something terrible. And it woke him up, but he always used to say the number one rule is be exceedingly courteous to the dead and to the ghosts. Just be, even if they seem angry back, just be so nice to them, ask their permission. So he was right, Susan?
Oh, yeah. And I would love to see that carried over to real life. Like I was I took a hike with my girlfriend this afternoon, and I was at one point I just was complaining about all the people in town I've noticed who don't use their directionals in driving, and I'm so annoyed by it. It's so easy to use it, and why do people not do it? I mean, and okay, I know the answer, because courtesy is going down the drain, and it's something I've been thinking about and writing about. I started writing about, this was such an interesting experience for me. I came up with this phrase. You know how writers are. They're always, we're always coming up with words, phrases that, we collect them and then we put them together. Came up with this phrase the death of common sense. You know, this is all part of what I'm talking about. And then I noticed that actually that was the title of a book written in the 1990s by Philip K. Howard, The Death of Common Sense. He's a lawyer. Have you read it?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, it's worth reading. I finally got the book and read it, and it's a wonderful book if you want to read about all the stupid laws we have.
Yes.
You know, because he's a lawyer, you know,
Right.
so and he really researched it and wrote it up very, very skillfully. But okay, my saying is this: we're experiencing the death of common sense, and with it, the death of common courtesy, common decency. We're at a very dark stage, but this is precisely where things start breaking up and opening up. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Well, I agree about the bureaucracy and all that. And like what Lao Tzu said, the more laws we create, the more outlaws we make. And we're making outlaws out of everybody, and we're just very rude, no reverence to our ancestors, to the spirits, to people we meet outside. So I'm ranting. Vance, do you have another question before stop me from ranting?
I'm about to go off myself.
Yeah, I'm sure you got your own.
It's all part of narcissism, right? The more self-involved we get, the less empathy we have, and the less courtesy we show people. But Susan, I was wondering, curious, how do you think the spirits perceive us? You know, the people in the spirit world. Like I say, if we ask them advice, like if you use a pendulum or something, and you ask permission and you're treating them courteously, you know, as another, respectfully as another entity. How do they see us? Did they come and visit us and watch what we do, or can they read our minds? What do you think? Or are there various levels of proficiency they have in still keeping up with things that are going on in the real world?
The more developed spirits have nothing to do with us, really. The spirits who have injected themselves in our lives are, for the most part, in the lower planes.
And they're here because of what? Again, because, as you say, they believed in reincarnation. They might have left the world in a traumatic way, and they don't want to go, or they just weren't very good when they left, right? And they're sort of sticking around on these lower dimensions.
Yeah, there are a lot of stories and a lot of reasons. First of all, any and all people who do not believe in the next life, in ongoing life, are going to be stuck in the lower places because upon leaving the body and going beyond, they're still conscious, you know. That's what spirit is. It's your consciousness, and so they'll think, "Oh, I'm not dead because I'm still thinking. I'm still conscious. Let me go back to Earth and find my body."
Oh no!
You know.
Right.
See, there's all kinds of variations of this. So the work that's happening now in transforming from the old paradigm to the new, a lot of it is clearing of the heavens of the earth. That has to happen. And that, like I say, quite a few of my associates in spiritualism and in Oahspe are psychic sensitives, mediumistic, clairvoyants, and they are involved in work of that nature, helping to clear the heavens of the earth of ignorant spirits. Because the only place for any of us to go is upward and onward and upward, into the light, into the next existence. Eventually, after hundreds and thousands of years, we become gods and goddesses ourselves, because there are so many worlds out there that need higher beings to administer them.
How about before? Where do we come from before we arrived here?
We were nothing. We were a brand new creation.
Do you have an internet presence or a way somebody can contact you?
Not really. Not really. But if you're going to ask me if there's anything I want to say.
Yes, please do.
Remember I talked a little while ago about the Native American there's going to be a renaissance of the Native American knowledge, and they're going to guide us. They're going to guide us through the new. Well, I want to say that I've gone back to work for the committee to free Leonard Peltier from wrongful imprisonment, and I just wanted to mention that, and to say that anyone else who wants to who is concerned about political prisoners in America, and particularly Leonard, who's been in prison the longest. It's 44 years now. Please look it up, and please join in. And we've got some beautiful postcards we made up in the committee. The committee is in Florida right now because Leonard is incarcerated in Coleman, Florida. We got some wonderful postcards that you can send to Donald Trump to ask him to pardon Leonard, because really the case is a FBI mess up. And so those are my thoughts. That's what I would ask people at this time. And the way to find it online is ILPDC, which is the International Leonard Peltier Defense Committee.
Well, there you have it. Check it out, audience. And if you need any more information, just message me. I'll have some of this information on our show notes. But I think we have come to the end of this full interview. Vance, thanks for keeping us company.
Oh, my pleasure. Very interesting material.
And Susan, muchas gracias for coming on Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio and discussing your book, Field Guide to the Spirit World.
De nada, es mi placer.
Mucho gusto y gracias, y el placer fue todo nuestro. Así es que gracias y buenas noches.
Buenas noches.
And there you have it. The first part of our interview with Susan Martinez on her new book, Field Guide to the Spirit World. It's a busy universe out there, and you don't stand a ghost of a chance without the right gnosis. In our second part, Susan shares what are the marks of spirit possession, and are there really demons out there? What in the Hades do you do if you know someone who is spirit possessed? We also discuss exorcism and what are some of the best ones across cultures, as well as purification magic in general. What about nightmares? Are they part of spirit possession? Susan also discusses more on her cosmology, including how hell might be 15 miles above Earth, and much more. As mentioned in the intro, Scott Smith, my friend and author of God Reconsidered, joined us afterwards, since he's also an expert on the topics we covered in this interview. Miss it not. All in all, it's more than 2 hours of red pill suppositories. So please get the full dope by becoming a member of the Archives or patron at Patreon. It's less than a GMO Roundup infected burger or beer for a full month that gives you plenty of rewarding content. Damning your soul has never been this cheap, but you'll get your spirit back, and a way to remove the counterfeit spirit from your existence. We are 100% audience supported, and I can't do it without you. For means to support, please go to, you got it, the God above God that can, or just message me. And you can always assist with shekels at PayPal or the US mail. It's a busy universe out there, and there are spirits in the material world, Sting. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being yourself, your true self, here in the desert of the real. As together we take this dark odyssey through the gnashing rocks of orthodoxy, all the way to the farthest shores of imagination. Hello and goodbye as always.